Alright, this is the second of my ancillary Dragon Age media reviews. Today we'll be taking a look at Dragon Age Redemption, a web series that was released alongside the Mark of the Assassin DLC for Dragon Age 2 in October 2011. Like the Dragon Age comic, it has a somewhat infamous reputation and messes up the lore, but people seem to be a bit more forgiving of it since it was evidently made with some real passion, and the cast and crew at least seem to have fun making it. The production values are also more or less what you might expect from a shoestring budget web series made in 2011. Felicia Day not only starred as Tallis as she did in the DLC, she also wrote the series. This is very much a vehicle for her. As far as I can uncover, her agent was talking to people at EA and Bioware in 2010, a year before Dragon Age 2 released, and Felicia Day managed to get things together to shoot in January 2011, just 2 months before the game released. She professed in interviews to be a big fan of Dragon Age Origins, and did another playthrough alongside further research while writing the web series. So the decision to include the Tallis character in the Mark of the Assassin DLC would seem to have come after Felicia Day created her for this series. I'm not sure if it was the plan from the start to use Felicia Day's character when making the DLC. As with the original Dragon Age comic, I'm kind of assuming most people aren't actually inclined to go watch this thing, so I will be describing what happens, but I will say it's rather short. The series is composed of 6 brief episodes, and the entire series clocks in at under 50 minutes. The original channel it was posted on has since been removed, but it has been uploaded to YouTube by others, at least at the time I was scripting this video. I will give my thoughts as I recount the series and sum them up at the end. If you'd rather not be spoiled, I will leave chapter timestamps. The series takes place at some point between 931 and 934 Dragon, as suggested by the opening with Qunari already in Kirkwall. Beyond that, there are no firm dates. Let's get into the first episode, Tallis. We get a simple text intro with some classy blood splatter describing some of the basic premises of Dragon Age. Mages are vulnerable to demonic possession, Chantry Templars regulate magic, the Qunari forcibly convert others to their rigid philosophy, the Qun, and mages from both groups are used as pawns in the conflict between Chantry and Qunari. That's more or less accurate. We begin in what is described as a Chantry prison, with Felicia Day's voiceover reciting part of the same prayer that Sten was reciting in his cage in Lothering, only in the common tongue instead of Kunlat. That's actually a nice reference. As for the Chantry prison, I think the only one that's mentioned in the game is Aenar, which is a special prison for mages. Yes, more than the circles themselves are prisons. I believe that was mentioned in the Mage Origins of Origins and then never again. Let's speed this up a bit. The torture of an old elven prisoner is interrupted by attackers led by Qunari. The prisoner calls him Saarebas, and he has just executed a prison break. Instead of freeing the elf, he begins to torture him, commanding him to reveal his secrets. Back in Kirkwall, Tallis makes her debut as Athlock. Apparently, sometime before this, she was demoted to a laborer for some failure. After dealing with a few human converts, I guess, that give her a hard time and call her Knife Ear, a Qunari comes. She is needed and will be made Tallis again. Qunari getting reassigned roles is a thing, so that checks out. She is told that a Saarebas has escaped a Chantry prison, and her task is to retrieve him alive. Okay, this is also a little lore-breaking. The Chantry have people in charge of minding their mages, the Arvarod, and they tend to view Saarebas that get away from their minders as tainted and would likely want to kill them. Still, not a deal-breaker. She manages to track down one of the escapees at precisely the same time a Templar does the same. Tallis and Cairn, the Templar, fight over custody of the prisoner, but Tallis is able to get what she needs out of him before killing him.
All I know is you're searching for some Dalish camp somewhere. Now let me up!
No, I'll do better than that. Your god here's called Andraste, right?
Yeah. She's brave and beautiful.
Sounds like we get along. Say hello for me.
Yeah, the dialogue writing here is not great. Very trying to be cool. Episode 2, Cairn, starts with another text card explaining the plight of elves in Dragon Age, the prejudice and oppression they face, and that the Dalish chose to live away from civilization to avoid this. All lore-friendly. Alright, so the prisoner had told Tallis the Saarebas is looking for a group of Dalish elves. Cairn tries to threaten Tallis into telling him what the prisoner said, but she basically just tells him to get lost. Cairn gets flustered and gets lost. While Tallis goes to get information from the merchant the prisoner was threatening earlier, Cairn follows a phylactery right to a Dalish camp that has recently been attacked. He is quickly surrounded, but Tallis, who actually got there ahead of him, intervenes.
How did you beat me here?
You followed the mage, but I went where the mage was going. Hope to get here ahead of him.
The elves tell them that the Saarebas and his followers attacked, ransacking the keeper's wagon for something. Apparently, the old elf from the first episode was this clan's keeper, captured by Templars some months previous. Just ignore the missing Velazline facial tattoos all the Dalish are supposed to have. They also meet the clan's first, Josmael, who is quite frantic as the attackers kidnapped his betrothed, Fina. He wants Tallis' help saving her, but Tallis refuses. Apparently, her previous demotion had something to do with sticking her nose into other people's messes instead of prioritizing her task. Josmael does tell her that the Saarebas took a Dalish artifact called the Golden Mask of Fen'Harel. He also calls Fen'Harel the god of nightmares, which is, not quite right. Josmael doesn't know much about it because the Keeper was taken before he could pass on that knowledge. Anyway, Tallis convinces Cairn to join forces by revealing that she has a collar that, when snapped around the Saarebas' neck, will render him powerless. I definitely don't remember anything like that from the games. Also, they will duel to see who gets to take the Saarebas when all is done. Josmael insists on coming along. It is also revealed how Tallis came to be Qunari in this conversation. Tallis was sold into slavery by her own parents as a child, a fate the Qunari saved her from. Episode 3, Josmael, starts by reiterating the fact that the Chantry holds all mages it can in circles and hunts mages who rebel as apostates, the Qunari arguably being worse in keeping their mages bound and leashed, all called Saarebas, meaning dangerous thing. Being a mage in Thedas is terrible, basically. Anyway, Josmael tries to convince them that he'll be useful by showing his magic, prompting Cairn to almost kill him on the spot, but Tallis talks him down. Then she throws a knife into Josmael's chest and orders him to heal himself to prove his usefulness. Jesus, that seems excessive, and a bit callous.
You stabbed me.
You wanted to prove a point. I proved it was my point.
Anyway, the trio head on their way. A conversation is had about the lonely lives of duty Cairn and Tallis live, while Josmael goes off about how much he loves his girlfriend. They follow the phylactery to a cave where they find the Saarebas.
As a drowning man knows the sea, so does a mage know magic.
Okay, that's a pretty good line. Josmael shouts out when he sees Fina, giving them away. A fight starts. It isn't terrible for something of these production values, but a big part of it hinges on yet another misunderstanding about how Templar powers work. I don't know why this is a thing in Dragon Age spin-off media. Cairn seems to use the phylactery to suppress the Saarebas' powers. When a Reaver pushes him down and the phylactery breaks, he can't suppress them anymore. In the games, a phylactery is just a magic tracking device for the person whose blood it contains. Templars gain the ability to suppress magical power by consuming a substance called lyrium. The two things have nothing to do with each other. At any rate, the Saarebas succeeded in using some of Fina's blood to activate the Mask of Fen-Harel. He and his followers stun the party, take Fina, and then collapse the cave entrance on them. Episode 4, Nyree, starts us off with a vague description of a Reaver as a warrior that commands the energy that flows through blood and bone, and may feast on the dead to heal themselves. They trade humanity for inhuman strength, thriving off of pain. Close enough. So the Reaver that had been working for Saarebas and got abandoned to be buried with others is named Nyree. Cairn unsuccessfully attempts to interrogate her, but they strike a bargain to hire her so she can lead them to Saarebas. She says he is headed for an elven ruin near Sundermount. He intends to use the Mask of Fen-Harel and Fina as a sacrifice to rip open the Fade. It's kind of ironic, considering all we know about Fen-Harel now, that this is the plan for the Mask of Fen-Harel. It's not a very interesting plan, but it sort of jives with canon. They speculate that Saarebas is going to create an army of demons to attack Kirkwall and destroy both the Qunari and the Chantry. They take a shortcut through the Vmark Mountains, suggested by Josmael, to try and catch up with the Saarebas, and along the way they stop at an inn. Wow, that effect has not aged well. I'm pretty forgiving considering what this series is, but yeah. The inn scene is mostly character stuff. Nyree indicates she was actually an innkeeper's daughter before deciding to become a Reaver, so she helped kill a dragon, drank some blood, and so it goes. Tallis elaborates on her backstory of why she was demoted to Athlock. She had been charged with retrieving a captured Qunari relic from an Orlesian nobleman and, importantly, to leave no trace. However, once she arrived, Tallis found the nobleman was keeping elven and human child sex slaves. She rescued them, but killed the nobleman in the process. This caused a major diplomatic incident that almost provoked a war between Orlais and the Qunari. It also wasn't her first incidence of renegade behavior, so she was demoted to Athlock. This whole backstory of Tallis is actually elaborated a little in The World of Thedas Volume 2, if you're interested. Tallis and Cairn's flirting is interrupted by the entire room turning out to be mercenaries working for Saarebas. Episode 5, Mercenaries, starts with some text that just explains that mercenaries are pretty common in this world. Huh. A fight commences between the party and the mercenaries. It's quick and just okay. The party comes into conflict. This group knew they were coming. Suspicion turns to Josmael, who reveals that he suggested this shortcut because of a message outside the cave he presumed to be left by Fina. Instead, it was a trap. I'm still not really sure why the Saarebas didn't just kill them then. Cairn starts threatening Josmael, but Nyree reveals Cairn's secret. The reason the Saarebas was able to escape was because Cairn had tried to kill him on the sly. Cairn admits to this. He was overpowered and the mage escaped. He did this because before the Saarebas was apprehended by the Chantry, the first thing it did after escaping the Qun was destroy an entire village, including Cairn's family. He stole the phylactery to continue his vendetta. They ultimately decide to continue after the Saarebas, but Josmael is missing.
Andraste's ass!
The final episode, Saarebas, has an intro card explaining what the Fade is and why tearing open the veil is a bad thing. Josmael arrives at the ritual site first, but the others catch up pretty much instantly. Cairn admits to Tallis that he never intended to return to the Chantry after all this, but he has no regrets. He advises Tallis to rebel against the Qunari in turn, to remain true to herself. The Saarebas arrives, and the party sneak up on them, but the moment Josmael gets a hold of his betrothed, she immediately betrays their presence. A fight breaks out. Saarebas races his slightly goofy-looking undead, and Fina tells Josmael that in the clan she was only ever the girl he was to marry, never special in her own right. The Saarebas offered her power, so she takes a dagger and tries to stab her betrothed as the sacrifice. Instead, Josmael accidentally stabs her, providing the sacrifice needed by the ritual. Tallis is able to stop the ritual by throwing her dagger into the mask. However, Cairn takes a magic bolt intended for her and dies. Tallis collars the mage, but ultimately decides to avenge Cairn and kills him. There is a somewhat poignant moment here where the Saarebas says he destroyed Cairn's village because that's all he ever was under the Cairn, a tool for destruction. Even when free, he could only continue to act as that tool, for it was all he knew. Tallis choosing to disobey her orders is a way of showing she isn't like him. She's more than the role the Qunari set out for her. Anyway, Tallis buries Cairn with Nyree and Josmael. Before she heads back to Kirkwall, Tallis hints she might become Tal Vashoth, a renegade against the Cairn. This ending is kind of undermined by the Mark of the Assassin DLC, where we find she has remained part of the Qunari, but I guess that's more on Bioware's writers. Alright, I'll sum up my thoughts in the spoiler-free section. At the time this originally came out, I think I was just happy to have any Dragon Age live-action media. It seemed really cool just that it had happened, and adaptations of game franchises were a lot more rare back then, with an even worse reputation than they have now. Now, with a new Dragon Age show on the horizon, and even though it is canon, I would have a hard time recommending anyone revisit this, though. It looks like a group of cosplayers LARPing, the writing is just okay at best, and it plays rather loose with the established lore of the franchise. It is what it is, a cheap early 20-teens web series. The plot is basic and the dialogue occasionally veers into trying too hard to be cool territory. Cairn and Tallis in particular get some decent characterization and motivation in, but most of the other characters are barely more than cardboard cutouts. It might be worth looking into if you're a big Felicia Day fan. I will give the project this, it does seem like she was genuinely enthusiastic about it, and again, the cast and crew seem to have had a good time making it. As for me, I can't shake the feeling that this series gives me. It reminds me of the sort of basic fanfic you see from time to time, where someone has to have their OC be the most badass person in every situation. Knowing that Felicia Day is the writer is probably contributing to that impression. That can be fun when it's well executed. This doesn't really have the resources or time to pull that off. That's probably making it sound worse than it actually is, but it is what this web series reminds me of. And now a little bonus trivia. A bit more than a year after this came out, Supernatural Season 8, Episode 11, LARP and the Real Girl, aired on the CW. This episode features Felicia Day as geek hacker girl Charlie, and at several points, cutscenes from the Mark of the Assassin DLC featuring Tallis can be seen on screens. I just always found that funny. That's all I have to say for now. Look for the Bioware Gear Store code if you're interested in a discount on Dragon Age or Mass Effect paraphernalia. You can take a look at my other videos if you're a Dragon Age fan. I have a lot of them, looking at lore and some reviews of the series. I wish you all a good day.